Hello everybody, I am about to be joined for a brilliant live where we're going to be talking about supplementation. It's always a burning question that so many readers ask about, and so today is being sponsored by Proceive fertility supplements, and they'll be taking questions if anyone has any. And also we're being joined by an expert fertility nutritionist, Our Fertility, and Angela Heap will be answering your questions too and talking about ways to optimize diet and lifestyle to increase fertility, and also answering questions about supplementation. So I'm really looking forward to this one because I know that so many of you out there need it. So let me just see if she's on and then we can start. Here we go. Those who are joining, nice to see you. It's going to be a great session today. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hi, Louise. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I've just given a brief introduction to today's session and mentioned that today is sponsored by Proceive, so they're going to be answering any questions on supplementation, and we're going to talk about ways to optimize egg, sperm health and fertility. So please could you start by telling us a little bit about you and how you help people who are on their trying to conceive journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a nutritional therapist, which basically means I have studied for 3 years, and within that, it means I have to do 200x plus of clinical hours with clients as well. So I'm kind of well trained around supporting that. But in terms of my experience with fertility, that was something that started fairly early on in my college history. So I started to get lots of clients coming towards me that were more interested in fertility, hormone management. So I guess you could probably say it kind of chose me initially. And then, you know, the rest is history in terms of my training and what I've been involved in over the years. So I tend to see clients in a regular basis. So I will help them to actually manage and support their body to balance their hormones so that they can actually conceive in the first place. A lot of people come to me, probably I'd say about 98%, who have had problems with conceiving in the past. There may be male or female issues or unexplained infertility. And what I do is I work out what the situation is there. We work backwards with lots of functional testing. And when I've actually got some, information around that, I work with whether they've had a diagnosis of some fertility conditions, and also I work with them as a couple or individually on their own. So I think it's important that we always work with both people, because sperm health makes up 50%.
Yeah.
As much as us ladies would try and manage to get, everything in the right place on our own, we do actually need the fellas in that situation to get where we need to go. So I've been a nutritional therapist for about 13 years now. And I'm now kind of taking it to that next level. I'm training other nutritionists at the moment to do what I do, learn from some of the things that I've done over the last sort of 13 years, and just taking it to that next level, really. I also see clients in clinic. I have a team of 3 other nutritionists as well. So it's mainly around working with diet and lifestyle and trying to help people to understand the impact of that, which is very much what we're talking about today around supplement, diet and lifestyle support.
Absolutely. So if we do a little bit about supplementation to begin with, because as I just mentioned, that's a question that I get asked all the time. I'm sure you do. Folate versus folic acid, that is always a topic of interest, and people want to know how much they should be taking, when they should be taking it. Proceive have just written an article on Fertility Help Hub, which I've popped in the link in bio if people want to check it out, where they explain the importance of it and the difference. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Because, for example, I know that Proceive supplements contain 400 milligrams of folic acid, and that's in an L-methylfolate for increased absorption. So why is that important when you're trying to conceive?
So obviously folate is very, very important. And if we think way back to our grandparents who didn't really take supplements, they would have had that in leafy greens. So that is a natural form of folate called dihydrofolate. And what we've basically done from building that and getting it into supplements is we found those elements really in regards to folic acid, and we tried to synthesize that in a lab. And I think we've used that and had lots of data and information around that since probably the 60s. And I think it was developed, as a supplement to go into supplements around, trying to prevent things like spina bifida and neurotube defects. And we do have a lot of data around folic acid, but it's not a complete form of folate there. So what we've got with L-methylfolate is it actually adds on a methyl group, which can make it a lot more sort of absorbable for people that may have genetic polymorphisms or mutations. So when we're absorbing that, it's very much part of that methyl cycle, and folic acid is right at the top, and what we need to get is to get it right to the bottom there. And there's many enzymatic processes to go through with that. And with L-methylfolate, it bolts on that methyl compound there that allows you to absorb that a little bit further down that pathway. And with people who might not necessarily have, issues with folate, they may have an issue with folic acid, because what folic acid does is it sometimes can block those receptors that allows that kind of transfer from that next process along that methyl wheel, if you like. So right at the bottom, we've got a gene called MTHFR, and some people may have some of these issues with processing folic acid. It may gum up some of those processes with that enzymatic reference there, and they can only get access, or they can get access to it much more readily if they use the methylfolate type of presentation there with the folate. It's more of a complete folate, for example, and it doesn't require too many steps before that to actually get into it. I like to say it's a bit like the M6 corridor and paying for that process. You get there a little bit quicker, and a lot of people do have this particular gene mutation which can lead to lots of things that cause issues with actually absorbing folate for DNA replication. And using this form actually is much better for them. And we have got a little bit of data around this. I tend to use it a lot with people that have had multiple miscarriages, and also people that may have actually have some of these gene mutations that we can look at under when we go through a raw data dump in regards to their polymorphisms, and I see that they've got some of these things.
Yeah, and is 400 milligrams kind of a blanket rule for all, or does the amount you should be taking depend on your health and history, if you like?
Well, methylfolate is much more of a kind of concentrated version there. So you don't necessarily need a huge amount of methylfolate. Some people do have issues breaking that down. It's basically like giving rocket fuel to people who have been on maybe the lesser petrol before that. So I think 400 micrograms is actually not a bad start with that. That's the UK value in terms of what we're using. We're going like for like on folic acid, but actually methylfolate is more stronger, and it can have a stronger effect because of that kind of methylation process in the body. So starting out with 400 micrograms, if you don't have an issue with that, is perfect. Some people do, that can actually speed up a lot of processes, but in the States, they actually recommend folic acid to 800 micrograms, up to a gram in some cases. And in some other countries as well, they have lower amounts of folate. It's based on a lot of the studies that came out in the 80s around what the folic acid levels were needed to prevent spina bifida and neurotube defects.
That makes sense, thank you. And for people who have joined, if you missed it, I put the link in the bio, but after this you can read an article written by Proceive which talks about folate and folic acid and what that means when you're trying to conceive. And someone just asked about AMH. What are your recommendations for people that you see who have a lower AMH?
I don't always go with this. I know it's a little bit controversial, but I found that for me, looking at a full hormonal panel that are looking at, the primary elements of the follicle development rather than the primordial kind of version of that. So AMH basically is looking for a hormone that's in the primordial pool. and it looks at the amount. And also, if you've got somebody with polycystic ovaries, they produce a lot of those primordial follicles, but it doesn't necessarily translate to actually antral follicles, the ones that are popped into the next box when, you know, everything starts to move there. So for me, I've had lots of people that had low AMH, and then they've actually gone and tested their follicle stimulating hormone, and also they've had antral follicle scans, and it's actually confirmed that they've got more available. So I would always get your primary practitioner or your nutritionist who specialises in fertility to actually run a raft of hormone tests and not just go with AMH, because it isn't always the be all and end all, as it has been with a lot of my clients.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And again, for anyone who's joined, if you've got any questions for Angela about diet, supplements or lifestyle, please ask. And also Proceive are on the line if you like here, so they're happy to answer questions about supplementation too. So don't be shy and feel free to ask. Lots of people might be concerned about what's inside supplements. So for example, I know that with Proceive there are no binders, no fillers, they're gluten-free and vegan. What does that matter for a fertility diet?
So I think, you know, for me, I don't always go with vegan supplements, because I do recommend people get vitamin A in their supplement and also vitamin K. But obviously there's a lot of people that are now vegan that need to have a supplement that supports their you know, their ethical approach to things. So I think, you know, for that reason, we've got the beta carotene in the Proceive, and a lot of other supplements just go with beta carotene and not the vitamin A side of things. And also a natural source, a plant-based source of vitamin K as well. So it's very important, obviously, that you know, you follow you know, your approach to your diet and ethical stance on things when you're pregnant. But there are different kind of supplements you can get that do cover vegetarian or non-vegetarian. Obviously Proceive is fully vegan, so if you are vegan and you want to go for a supplement that supports that, then it will have, you know, those different forms of nutrients that are more plant-based there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've had a couple of questions come in. One from Ruth is for Proceive. So Proceive, if you could please answer that. Whilst Aunt Angela, I just ask you, what's the difference between methylated folate and folic acid?
So we kind of answered that a little bit earlier, Tina. So if you want to maybe go back and listen to that earlier, it was a really long answer, and I could tell there was a few people falling asleep with that, because it was very convoluted in regards to that. So there is a difference in terms of that. Folic acid is probably a much more older established form of folate, whereas L-methylfolate, which is used in a lot of newer supplements now, is the kind of methylated version. If you know chemistry, it basically is bolted on a methyl group there, which allows it to be absorbed much more readily by the body. And also it's been utilised for a lot of people that I've been using who've had multiple miscarriages, who may have some genetic polymorphisms which stop them from actually transferring that folate down that pathway to allow them to get it into the cell.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying. And in case you've just joined, there's a link in the bio to an article which explains about folate and folic acid as well. So that gives you more information. And what about supplementation, apart from a prenatal post egg collection for IVF? This is about grams of protein a day. Do you recommend when people state high protein, is 100 grams enough, for example?
I think it all depends on your weight, basically. I'm not a nutritionist that goes on, you know, macros in regards to proteins and carbs and everything else. I'm not a dietitian, so I don't generally tend to go on things. I like to go with more of a holistic whole food diet there. But I think when it comes to building eggs and sperm, and good eggs and sperm, I tend to like a higher protein diet and a lower carbohydrate diet there, and getting most of my carbs from vegetables and making sure you're having at least 8 to 10 portions of veggies a day and fruit, and then making sure that you have a good level of protein, but depending on what it is and how well absorbed it is as well, because you can have a lot of protein, but it may be that you don't absorb that. So it's about absorption, really.
Yeah.
And if you're having lots of red meat as well, if you're not breaking that down, it's just going to sit there and cause more fermentation, cause issues with, breaking that down in the bowel and all sorts of things. So I would say always go and speak to a nutritionist who specialises in this area if you are embarking on IVF and you want to make sure you're having enough of that. I see a lot of these things on IVF clinics who really have been using the same kind of bog standard approach to protein for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they give people advice to take a pint of full fat milk, and that just, makes my ears burn, to be honest, because that's not always the best source.
Yeah.
We, as a Western country, drink a lot of milk, and as does America, and we have the highest levels of osteoporosis in the world.
Wow.
So I would say you may not be absorbing that form of calcium, and you need to maybe look at that. The protein in it obviously comes from, the liquid source and the fat, but again, it isn't always the best source of protein for you. It may be quite mucus forming for you if you can't break that down. There are certain sort of nationalities and races that can actually have issues with breaking that down in terms of the enzymes for milk. So I would look at something that's bespoke for you by going through a very kind of detailed approach to your diet.
Yeah.
Things like bloating and having, reactions to foods after you eat them. You may have been having them your whole life and think that's fairly normal, but actually when you go through a food diary with symptoms attached to that, a nutritionist can actually, bring a bit of a light bulb moment there to you, saying, well, actually, maybe there's some digestion issues and we need to work backwards from there and look at protein sources that are actually really good for you that you can absorb.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Someone's just talked about IVF and being 42. And there are supplements out there that cater for people who are, say, over 35 or who have been trying to conceive longer than a year, obviously, if you're going into IVF, for example. So someone else was asking about, did someone ask about discounts? Proceive have a max form for men and women, for women over 35, and Proceive Max for men over 40. And if you want to have a look, they're giving our readers 15% off. Let me just find the code for you so I don't give you the wrong code. It's FHHVIP 15 if you want to look at that. Now, someone has just asked about Zoospermia. Have you heard of that before?
That's basically a form of sperm where if it's azospermia, that basically means that there's no sperm. And obviously, Eloise, you're probably quite familiar with that form.
Yes,
but that form basically just shows that there is mutations in the sperm and it may not be the best possible quality. And they may look at retrieval directly from the testicles there before it's actually formed, and using that. And I have a client at the moment that just sent me a lovely testimonial around building his sperm up because that's what happened to him, and he's had much better results even just getting that directly from the testicles from that particular form of sperm retrieval called a tessie. So for me, you still build the sperm up in exactly the same way as you would do normally. It's just that they don't generally ejaculate healthy sperm at that point. So for sperm health, there's some great supplements out there for that. The Proceive have some really good amino acids in there, and I would probably look at maybe the max one for the men to go with. Also making sure that you do maybe an analysis, a nutrient analysis on whether there are some low levels of those nutrients that are the feeder tubes effectively down to your testicles in terms of building your sperm. So that's a food issue or a nutrient issue. You can also have some issues that may be around environmental. So it could be that, you're warming the testicles up too much and that's killing the sperm or making the sperm mutated. So there's lifestyle things you can do to actually improve that. And those are things like, wearing less lycra if you're going for runs or in the gym and things like that, making sure you're not going to the sauna, you're not having really super hot baths, and you're also not wearing your mobile phone or anything round by your pocket, which can actually heat them up as well. So there's lots of things you can do that are very basic for sperm health. It is, if it's a little bit more advanced than that, and you have got an issue, you've been doing all these things, you've been looking at diet and you've reduced your alcohol down, your caffeine, all of the things, and you're drinking a lot of water and you're having a very healthy diet, it may be that we need to look into the health of the sperm and do something like a DNA fragmentation test to see whether, you know, there is some issues with the DNA of the sperm there. A lot of men obviously just go for a basic sperm analysis and everything looks good on the surface, but I think we need to go a little bit further when it comes to sperm that has been identified as, you know, problematic or not able to fertilise even at ICSI level, you know, where it's injected directly into the egg. So when we come to these things, there are means to do that, obviously through something that I mentioned, the TESI, but it can be a very expensive procedure and it's not something that's done on the NHS naturally. So just getting your sperm in the best possible way, you know, with some of the tips that I just mentioned, doing a nutrient analysis, doing a DNA fragmentation, and also making sure you're adjusting your lifestyle as well, and reducing down your processed food. Sleep is very important for that as well, and also general approach to life really in terms of your mental health there.
Definitely. And for people or men, because we know it takes two to tango, who are preparing for treatment or trying to conceive naturally and they start taking a supplement like Proceive Max, do they need to consider, for men, do they need to consider taking that 3 months before? Is that a must, or is it kind of you've got as much time as you've got, but the more you can do the better?
Well, there are sort of different schools of thought really in regards to sperm health and processing that. Women are obviously born with all of their eggs, but what we can do is make an impact in regards to reducing down the oxidative stress level if someone is over 35. But with men, it basically means that they're producing new sperm every 72 to 90 days. So if you're working backwards, and you've got IVF maybe in a couple of weeks' time, there may not be much we can do to make a difference with that. But with most of my clients, I try and get the men to start implementing things from at least 2.5 months backwards, so that we have the IVF based around the fact that the sperm does get produced in new quantities every 72 to 90 days. So those are the kind of things I would suggest if you're going on a health kick, reducing your alcohol down, improving your sleep, and obviously exercise regimes and eating healthily. Those are the things we need to be doing from at least 2.5 months on, or backwards, working backwards before you're going for IVF.
Do you see clients who might think that things can improve just by taking vitamins for a week or something like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, but I'm just one of those people that's very straight up.
Yeah.
And if they come to me and say I've got IVF next week and my fella's really not up for doing any of these things and he's a bit, you know, fed up with me giving him supplements, it's, you know, like you said before, Eloise, it takes two to tango. If you want healthy babies, healthy sperm, then you're going to have, you know, a very much better result if you're doing these things beforehand, you know, and the result will be there. You know, the sperm 2 months beforehand, if you've done nothing, you know, it's one of my kind of mantras there: if nothing changes, you know, if you don't change anything, nothing changes. So I think you've got to do these things to get a better result, because the sperm test will be part of that. And if it hasn't changed from the last IVF and you haven't changed anything in your lifestyle, then, you know, that's because you haven't done anything. It's not going to change just because you are doing it a second time. You know, it's not a case of hitting it more times and then maybe the third time it will work. You've got to make a change to your lifestyle really to improve that. And that couple I mentioned before that went for Tessie, she actually had 18 fertilized eggs, which is a lot more than she had last time round.
Amazing.
When she'd done it just with herself. So her and her husband were absolutely delighted with that result. And it was really nice to get the email because I hadn't heard from them in a while. And, you know, they said they were, you know, getting it all sorted for it. And just to give me some feedback on the fact that all these things that I had a husband doing, which he wasn't too pleased about at the time in terms of his lifestyle, actually had a massive result in terms of his fertility. And if you think about it, it's not just fertility, because sperm is basically a window into the man's health. You know, we're looking at sperm health changing over the last 43 years or 47 years, which is when they started testing for that. It's gone down 1.3% every year. So,
Really,
you
just
know,
on
we
bad
are,
lifestyles.
I know it's an incredible kind of amount. We're kind of at, as they call it, spermageddon in 2045 if we don't make changes to lifestyle around that. So I think we definitely have been ignoring the fellas a little bit more and focusing on the women. And what we need to do is kind of change that narrative, start saying to men, what you do in your lifestyle actually does make a difference.
Yeah, and I Proceive, if you're there, please could you just tell us a little bit more about the max for men, and what's in there to help with sperm, just so we understand, I guess, the difference. And we also had someone who wrote in before just asking, for someone who's got a vegetarian diet, what about alcohol and caffeine whilst you're trying to conceive?
Um, my phrase, which I always say, is we're trying to detox so that you get better quality eggs and sperm, and alcohol will actually retox you. So it's going through the liver, it will be processed through that. And I think even though the NHS says, and you know, different medical establishments around the world will say you can have some alcoholic drinks, it all depends on you individually and how, you know, your liver processes things. And I think, you know, that's very individual, really. So without knowing how your liver works and how, you know, different phases may hang on to things and then, you know, bottleneck things and cause issues with that, I always say a blanket across the patch. It's only 3 months of your life. Maybe just go a little bit healthier and just kind of, you know, don't have a drink, you know, for that period of time. The odd one's okay, but generally I say to most of my clients, there's no point doing all this hard work if you're going to be having, you know, a few glasses of wine every night, because it's actually then going to have to process in exactly the same way through your liver. And that's where all your hormones are coming from as well.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets chucked out of the line because it has to deal with the immediate toxins and poisons, which basically are what alcohol is to the system, really.
And also, I guess if it's going to make you worried and anxious, and if the cycle doesn't work for some reason, if it's IVF or it's not working naturally, you don't want to do things that you're going to blame yourself for either, do you?
Yeah, sure.
If something is in your power, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's difficult because sometimes, you know, the culture in the UK is very much drinking and men going out with their friends to have a drink. So that can often cause arguments between the couple if the
Yeah.
woman's giving that up and the man isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I would basically have an agreement if you are in a couple and the man says, I'm not giving up the booze, just say, well, can you reduce it? And can we look at things that maybe, you know, you have soft drinks or other drinks that may be more beneficial. You don't necessarily have to have a drink with the lads all the time. You can, you know, have something that's not going to be as detrimental, and maybe lay off fat a little, go a little bit lighter on the booze, really.
Yeah, definitely. So Proceive just told us a bit about Max for Men, as we're talking about men at the moment. It contains 33 vitamins, so minerals, amino acids, and omega-3 tailored for male preconception health. Angela, why are things like amino acids and omega-3 useful or paramount for conception, healthy conception?
Well, I think amino acids, some of them have been studied individually. So things like acetylcarnitine and also and acetylcysteine are actually really useful for detoxification and also for supporting the strength and motility of the sperm as well. So they will have different functions depending on, you know, the studies that they've done. Definitely when it's down to things like acetylcysteine and acetylcysteine, there are some studies that look at that in terms of how it supports the liver. So I usually recommend that for a lot of my clients who've had poor sperm, and, you know, in past IVF cycles, we've been able to see that from the amount that have actually fertilized in the first place. So if you go through something like ICSI, where it injects the sperm individually into the egg, you can see whether the egg actually fertilizes in the first place and whether it gets past day 3 as well. It can often be down to the sperm health if it doesn't actually get any further than that. And again, that's where, you know, things like that can really, really help to boost your detoxification process there, stop those oxidative stresses, you know, sort of burning through and mutating the sperm and not allowing it to move forward. So we've got those kind of amino acids. We've obviously got things like carnitine, which have had a, you know, a lot of studies done on sperm health in terms of giving energy to the sperm. I often say if you're a guy and you've not got much energy, it's an example of potentially what your sperm might be as well. So it's always good to know if you are lacking in energy, potentially your sperm may also have that same effect. And that's where some of these, you know, more amino acids can actually help boost that in terms of energy wise, and also, you know, different components of protein, obviously with different amino acids, will have different approaches really in max strength type Proceive supplements or in normal ones. So the max strength one is more recommended for people who've had maybe non-successful IVF attempts, or people who've actually had fertility issues and it's been identified as maybe male fertility factor. And they will have a lot more things in there, particularly things also like fish oils as well, which a lot of people see as quite important for the integrity of the outer casing of the DNA from the sperm, really. So allowing that to then be able to get through to the inner circle of the egg, the nucleus there.
Interesting. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. I'm going to also ask Proceive, what is the difference for women in terms of normal supplements versus max strength? So we can just talk a bit about why people might consider those elements of supplements if they're, as you said, we said, been trying for longer than a year or over the age of 35. 35 does come up as this sort of age, doesn't it, that everyone in the field talks about as being this ultimate like drop off in terms of fertility. Do you see in your practice, do you see a decline at that age, or would you say it's kind of gradual from there?
Well, I see a lot of people 39 to 45, to be honest. So I think I'm kind of the last port in the shipping situation, where people have kind of gone down IVF, or they've tried for a number of years and it hasn't kind of improved that. But, you know, working with a nutritionist, you can tailor your nutrients to your particular situation, can look at maybe a diagnosis that you may have and work around that. It's probably the best thing to do, rather than kind of, you know, going on a lot of forums, trying to, you know, work your way through it based on other people. But I found when you individualize things and you look at maybe some of the issues that that person has, you can actually improve egg and sperm considerably. I've had quite a few ladies that have had better results on IVF, where you can actually see the quality of the egg and sperm when they're doing that. And that's important, because when you're at that stage, if you worked through an IVF clinic and it's been the same consultant, they've often said things like, what have you done? You know, things are completely different this time. And that's just a nod to individualized type approach to health and well-being, and that will be reflected in your egg and sperm health, and also your reproductive cycle as well. You know, things will change and you'll start to notice that, you know, you feel a lot better. A lot of people I've had have gone for IVF at 39 and they've come back and said, do you know what, I'm probably too old now at 43, but let's give it a shot. They've gone through that whole IVF cycle and found that they've had better egg count when they've gone through egg harvesting, and then they've you know, had much more fertilization, and the consultants have been really impressed with their approach to things.
That's great.
You know, I think they're starting to, at IVF clinics, really understand the importance of lifestyle and diet and supplements, but a lot of them are really unaware of it, and they'll say it's up to you, you can work with a, you know, nutritionist outside of that. But sadly, still, we haven't got a lot of nutritionists working on the IVF side of things in the clinic that's part of that package. You know, and I think it does make a huge difference, really. And I go back to, you know, some of the training that I've done and some of the research. There was an organisation called Foresight, and they basically were working as a charity in the 80s and 90s, and they worked with over 300 couples. And when they did an individualized approach to their fertility, when they'd had previous miscarriages or stillbirths or things like that, something like 89% of them actually carried to term and had healthy children.
Wow.
So we haven't got many of these studies out there, but the ones that we have show that actually this is an amazing thing to do to really up and boost your levels, so that, you know, we're not just getting better results on IVF, but the babies that are born are actually getting a much healthier start in life, because, you know, their immune system and all the things that, you know, are built during that process in the 9 months when they are healthy as well, will have a good effect on their long-term health.
I made a huge, well, my first round of IVF just went into it without any preparation at all, and the result was more disappointing than we'd hoped in terms of embryo quality. And the second time round, I'd had 3 months to go, went back to London, prepare nutritional support, supplements, running, all sorts of things, just really looking after myself. And despite getting fewer embryos, they were better quality. So I do believe in the holistic support. So the Max Women, Proceive Max Women, which is aimed at people sort of over 35, as we said, it has the L-methylfolate form for increased absorption. And we talked a bit earlier about why absorption is important. So if anyone missed that, feel free to watch it back shortly. But are there any other questions that anyone's got for Proceive about supplements, how much to take, when, what's important in them, what they should be looking at? Or does anyone have any questions about diet, lifestyle for Angela whilst we've got them? Feel free to ask now. And I'm just going to comment now with the code. So if you want to have 15% off exclusively, you can use this code, which I'm popping into the chat. Sorry, my phone's playing up. Oh my goodness. FH8 VIP 15. Is that it?
I mean, I've got both of them here in terms of the normal one, the conception one, and the max. And actually, the B vitamins on there are quite similar, but what they've kind of upped is the amino acids and a little bit more around the CoQ10 as well, which I know a lot of ladies do from It's All About the Egg, and they use CoQ10 and improve that. And I think that's a good thing. You know, CoQ10 in the studies, they've basically used the non-ubiquinol type, which is the more kind of well-studied one. And they probably said maybe 70 grams of that. So when you're taking a supplement, they won't give you uber high levels of things, because they hope that obviously you're going to be getting that in a diet. And I think the important thing is that you don't use supplements and then sort of have, you know, lots of processed food and eat all the wrong things and think, oh, well, I've got to supplement. Yeah, exactly. It's not going to overcome a bad diet if you have supplements. What it will do, and that's the reason why it's called supplement, you know, it's to supplement your diet, and you've got to make those changes to your lifestyle and your diet to actually allow this to be the cherry on the top that will just push you over that level and give you, you know, more that you need there. So, you know, I think that's where, you know, going for something like Proceive, if you are a little bit older, if you're over 35, you can get sort of more on the amino acid side. You know, there's a little bit more on the CoQ10 side, so it's 40 milligrams on the max one, as opposed to 20 in the normal one. So again, if you don't have any known issues with your fertility and it's the first time you're trying, then, you know, using something that has less may work for you if you're changing your diet and you're looking at all those things. But if you have had maybe some fertility issues, if you're going for IVF, then you probably need to go for a stronger version of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had some more questions come in. I don't know if these are more for you or for Proceive. And apologies if I've missed any questions. I'm trying to get through them all. I know people have been DMing at the same time, but I can't see that whilst we're live.
Okay, there's a few, isn't there, underneath that? So do you have a supplement you would recommend for someone with underactive thyroid? So if you are on medication for a thyroid condition or any medication, it's worth working with a nutritional therapist who can actually balance that out in terms of what you're taking, because there are some schools of thought that if you are taking medications, if you've got Hashimoto's, which is a more kind of autoimmune condition around the thyroid, that you have to be a little bit careful with iodine. Although it's very important for the development of the baby, iodine, you have to be a little bit careful with that. So there are some supplements on the market that don't have iodine in them that are prenatals, and some that do. But if you have a general, just an underactive thyroid, a hypothyroidism there, you are probably okay to have a good amount of iodine in there. But again, for your thyroid, the reason it's probably gone wrong is there may be some nutrient deficiencies there. So things like vitamin D may be low, you may have low iron as well, you might have heavy periods if you already have an underactive thyroid, which is contributing to that. You may also have low levels of selenium, which is an important antioxidant. You may have low levels of magnesium as well. All these things generally will be quite supportive for your thyroid, and maybe at some point in time you've had some deficiencies that have led to the thyroid being a little bit out of balance. And again, if that goes on for many, many years and you're still kind of not eating a very whole food diet and supporting with lots of, vegetables and enough protein there, then it could well be an issue. I've seen a lot of vegans and vegetarians with thyroid issues, and I think that generally can be down to the fact that meat generally does have a complete set of amino acids there. I'm a pescatarian myself, and when I studied nutrition, I was a vegetarian, and I actually switched over to having fish occasionally. So I am definitely much more on the vegetarian and pescatarian scale, but I do recommend to a lot of my clients who are meat eaters that they actually add in meat into their diet to get that level of amino acids that they can get from meat there. And obviously, if you're vegan, you have to be very good in terms of the beans and legumes that you're having to balance out the right levels of amino acids. So if you're just going for a lot of these kind of, vegan burgers and things like that, there's a lot of processed things in those. So you have to be a little bit careful. I think almost the old school vegans were actually a lot more healthier than a lot of the stuff that's coming out now. The ones that used to eat loads of beans and legumes and didn't probably have all these protein smoothies might have, lots of issues with breaking down the forms of the the protein in there. I had a vegan client who was a guy, and he had the highest sperm level I've ever had.
Really?
So, but he was also outside. He was a tree surgeon, so he was out and about. He got a lot of sun. He was doing a lot of exercise, and as a couple, they were both incredibly into working out the amino acid base in what they were having. So when you're somebody with a particular diet there, you can't just go, oh, it's fine, I'll be okay. You have to be very, very sort of mindful of maybe speaking to a nutritionist, even someone who's a vegan nutritionist as well, who can help you manage that, and working through what the best thing for you is, because you may also have a really bad digestive system. You may not be breaking down your beans and legumes, and you might be pretty antisocial in that situation there with that. So it's all important, I think, getting the right advice for you, because you're an individual. Your body is even different from the same family where you both have the same parents. It can be a completely different thing.
I'm conscious of time, but I just wanted to ask you, selenium, is that how you say it? Yes. I saw Proceive said that they have that in their max. How is that important for women?
So that's important for both men and women, reproductive sort of support. So selenium is an antioxidant, and it's quite important. It's been quite lacking in the soil in many countries when they go for mechanized kind of approach to agriculture. So in the old days, when they used to do a lot of crop rotation and things were more organic, the soil was more kind of abundant with selenium. Nowadays, because of the mechanization of everything, food has become a lot less nutrient dense. And I think getting selenium is quite an important part of that. So again, I talked about the thyroid and how important that is for the body and generally for your reproductive system. It's important for building that and supporting your metabolism. And also, if you've got something that's out of kilter with your thyroid, it can have an effect on pregnancy as well. So if you're pregnant, it can actually make it a little bit worse as the energy stores get taken from you through pregnancy. So I would say selenium is really important for your thyroid. It's also very, very important as an antioxidant. And it's something that's in a lot of supplements for male health in particular, because it can actually help to take away that oxidative stress, both from male and females. When the sperm is ejaculated, obviously it's on its way, and also when the egg pops out of its follicle as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Angela. That's been so insightful. I hope everyone watching has found it insightful. And thank you so much to Proceive for answering all these questions. And as I said, you can read more about folate, folic acid, and Proceive through the link in bio. And our readers get an exclusive 15% off with FHH VIP 15. So thank you everyone for your time. And it was lovely to see those who joined. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you for inviting me, Eloise. I think it's been really helpful, and it's always good to chat through things with people, particularly a lot of the questions around vegan health as well.
Definitely. And any questions, just DM any of us and we can let you know.
Excellent.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.